Ignition sequence start. 3, 2, 1. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. Tower cleared.
We got a roll program.
Hello, wrestling fans. Thank you for joining us for part 2 of the Pioneers of the Independent Networks, looking at the very first Wrestling Independent Network card on February 7th, 1992 at Martin's North Point in downtown Dundalk, Maryland. We're joined this week on location by Ed Zahn, Jeff Capo, Julie Blanton, Ricky Blues, and other friends that are stopping by. And I'll be here at the control center. Ricky Blues is there in Dundalk. Ricky, are you still there?
Yep, Tim, I got you.
I see him now.
Yep, we're ready to go. These guys are primed, and we've actually added an additional guest. Just real quick, picking up from last week, not only do I want to introduce Ed Zahn again, reintroduce Ed Zahn, Julie Blanton, and Jeff Capo, but I want the founder of the Feast when it came to championships at that time, Agent Orange. Agent Orange, welcome to the show.
Right in the center where I'm supposed to be. Very rarely do I get the amount of respect that I believe I deserve.
Once a worker, always a worker.
Rarely do any of us get the respect that we believe we deserve.
One of my big impressions from that night, February 7th, 1992, was how well the characters were over with the fans. The fans were very familiar with all the characters on that card. From top to bottom, they knew their personalities. They knew who were the popular wrestlers and who were the ones that they just loved to boo. And that told me that the UIW television had made an impact. It had defined the players. Everybody knew who the players on the field were. And it made a big impression on me that night at how well the crowd reacted to each of the matches without having to be reintroduced to all the characters. And it also showed me how well the characters connected with the fan base. Every one of the wrestlers on that show was over with that crowd. And I think that is one of the most important things when we talk about a wrestling card. Everybody needs to be over, and that night, everybody was over and over big. This was a very well-booked card from bottom to top. We had cruiserweights, we had women, we had midgets, we had national stars that are just off the television, like the Honky Tonk Man and Nikolai Volkov. I think it was very important to match up Nikolai Volkov with the Honky Tonk Man that night. Nikolai being a local legend and so well known throughout the area, and the Honky Tonk Man being the longest reigning Intercontinental Champion of all time, and just such a natural heel. It just made for such good reactions during their main event match that night. And we also have to give credit to not only the wrestlers, but also the referees, Joe DiCarlo and Dave the Wave, who did their roles to perfection that night as well. I definitely think that card sent out a statement to all the fans and all the wrestlers in the Mid-Atlantic area. I just wanted to ask Ed, Jeff, and Julie, what do each of you think that first win card meant to the area? What kind of statement was made that night?
Again, it was just that opportunity to put together the complete package and put together a show that had no gaps, had no filler, had no. You know, I took a lot of heat over the years because I always had that standard of the quality of the talent that would be on a show that I would be associated with. That you opened that show.
Right.
The idea was if you've ever been to an indie show and the opening match is boring and sad and just kills the audience, you can't get them back.
Right.
You'll
They're
spend by the time you get them back, it'll be intermission and you lose them again. So the idea was for you guys to come in and wow them and do, because you were doing a style at that point that really wasn't seen on the independent scene. It was seen in Japan and the tapes that were traded at the time, but people really hadn't seen the athletic high flyers. And they're so common today, but at that point, you know, if I could find 6 of them, I was lucky.
Right.
And I was fortunate to have you. And that was the idea. Set that pace early. It's going to be entertaining. You don't want to take your eyes away from the ring because something's going to happen. And then all the little pieces that were done between the matches to flow the card. The special gimmick match that we did with the tag team at the time, because there was so many. There was the Texas Tornado matches, Bunkhouse Stampede, all them kind of gimmick matches. So we came up with the Eye of the Hurricane match because that feud was constantly falling out of the ring and going all over the place. And we just said, Eye of the Hurricane, you get out of the ring, you hit the floor, you're done. So it was a way to do a steel cage match without putting a steel cage up. You know, that type of thing. And a lot of it was just what works best for the fans, what makes things flow. You know, we had the women on the card. There was a point with the women that was show people that the women can really wrestle and put on a good wrestling match that you actually want to sit there and watch for the wrestling. It was just, you know, it's just, and we had time to build that card too. That was the other thing about it, because we had time to think about it, arrange all the pieces to lead up to what we did that night, including the piece on WJZ. You know, and it just worked. It just was, you know, putting the right people together to have the best match that they can. I hate going to indie cards, and I can see a card. I do it today. You know, I'll go to a card, and there'll be 7 matches on the card, and I'll look at them and think you could have had 3 really exceptional matches, but you took no time to think about how you matched up your talent in the first place, and making sure everybody worked off everybody well.
That's true, and that's a big point. I want to throw that to Jeff. Knowing your talent, Jeff, you come over with Ed from the UIW.
Correct.
One of the things that I thought, and Tim has pointed out back in the studio, is that people in Maryland, because of the TV that we had on JZ with UIW, was familiar with who the characters were. So I think I don't want to say that we had an unfair advantage, because you guys dug that. We trenched in and dug that. Okay, what would your perspective be on the characters and the people that were already familiar because of that show, helping win out a little bit?
Well, it was a two-way relationship, because we knew you guys. We had watched several of you. I had been watching the indie scene for 3 years up to that point. Was familiar with a lot of the characters. We allowed you to be you. We didn't bring you guys on the show and say, okay, well, Ricky Blues, you really can't do the high flying stuff, or Agent Orange, you really can't be a heel and do your thing that you're doing. You know, we wanted you guys to showcase yourselves, and in the meantime, you had already had feuds, you already had storylines going. We just wanted to continue that because, again, we were drawing the fans in who had been also watching you guys probably even longer than we had, from all your beginnings, to allow that to flow. And it made you guys work better because you were already familiar. It allowed you to do what you wanted to do, and it gave us the matches that we wanted to have, not only from a promotional standpoint, but honestly from a fan standpoint. We were fans. We were always fans. And that's what we wanted to see.
And you gave a good platform for it.
Absolutely.
So you didn't have to reinvent the wheel. You took it and you honed it. Like we said in the first portion, you took all those things that had come into existence and you polished them. The cream of the crop, really, you did. You handpicked who you wanted to create your win, what you were going to say and win. I know it's a tough one for you, Julie, being behind the scenes in what you did. But give us a little bit of your perspective, because we've heard Jeff's and we've heard Ed's perspective on that. But think about the talent that was there. I mean, you had experience, too. You had experience at VWA and saw what was there.
I never built a card. I left that up to the genius.
Thank you. But
I just wanted them to build a card
you're
that
pointing
I
at
could
Ed, sorry.
promote. Yeah, not you. Sorry, you were on the card though.
Well, that's genius.
So,
There you go.
so again, I just wanted a card that I could go out and promote. And the better the card, the easier my job was.
You can't put lipstick on a pig and try to sell it.
Amen.
Because you might sell it once, but that's it. No one's buying it after that.
That's right.
So that was a big thing for you to make sure that that talent was there. Your brother was part of the talent pool that got brought in, and some of the other guys from VWA. Absolutely.
Yeah, we tried to, we tried to give a lot of good talent opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So, that was,
And I think one thing too was our roster was deep.
Oh,
Our
yeah.
roster was extremely deep, and the other thing too that we tried to do, and I think was our thing too. We were open to the other promotions. We acknowledge Agent Orange as BWA champions.
Right.
We acknowledge the AWF champions. We acknowledge MEWF, or and even the Pacific champion, because it's what Tom and King Kalua wrestled for.
Right.
We were not going to be that. If it's only win stuff, and we're only concerned with that. We didn't want to go down that road. We didn't. Again, going back to letting you guys do what you do best.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't want to put those type of restrictions on anybody, or even to be honest about it, we were definitely wanting to work with Dave Lehigh and the others that were out there. Network, again, we talked about network. It was all part of the network.
Well, that was kind of, again, the idea was in the name, not just the name and attitude, all right? Because there was a lot of things going on at that time. We wanted to be the premier wrestling federation in the area. We wanted to be a network, but we wanted our independence. We wanted to be able to do what we wanted to do and not have to answer to other people for it. Didn't want to have to do things like buddy booking.
Mhm.
Okay, you put me on your show, I'll work on your show, blah, blah, blah. Didn't want to do that. Took a lot of criticism for what we did, the way we did it. But if you look at this card, a lot of this was the Baltimore-based talent and then mixing in the other styles. One of the things I look at now that I didn't realize we were doing at the time was, again, when I go to indie shows, so many indie shows, I'll go, everybody works the same match. Everybody works the same
Right.
way. Because all they do is work each other.
Right.
And they really don't get out there, as I say, get out there, get over. So they really don't do that. And if you look at the way this card is laid out, where you have guys from different promotions working the Baltimore guys too, so everybody's learning different styles, different moves, different sells. It was, again, this is stuff we stumbled into and we're doing without even thinking about it, because our main concern, again, really came down to is how do we put on the best possible show with the budget and the talent we have. That's all that matters. And I don't care about politics. I don't care if you like this person or that person. Just come in, put everything together, show everybody what you can do.
The fan experience. You guys held
That's all
the
that
fan
matters.
experience in the utmost esteem. We're going to talk in episode 3 a little bit about one of the things that you guys did, a little fan fest convention with John Arezzi. We'll talk about that in the part 3 of this. But again, which was another brilliant stroke that showed your depth.
One of the most interesting things that I found about that card was the main event between the Honky Tonk Man and Nikolai Volkov went on 6th out of the 8 bouts scheduled that night. A lot of fans will ask, why was the main event 6th instead of 8th? Well, that night attracted a lot of casual fans from the area. And being on a Friday night, some of those fans were probably a little bit tired as the night wore on. So the promoter very wisely put the main event on 6th so that he wouldn't keep families with young children out too late. If you're going to go to a show like that, you're going to want to see the main event. But nonetheless, it was a great card from start to finish. Even after the main event, we had Tom Brandi and King Kalua in an Eye of the Hurricane match. The final match that night was an exciting ladies match between the recognized NWA Ladies Champion, Misty Blue Sims, who had just come off some national television where she was linked up with Dusty Rhodes on the NWA cards, and her opponent was her longtime rival, Linda Dallas. So nonetheless, the last 3 matches were main event caliber, and they were all exciting, they were all good, and it capped off a great evening of professional wrestling in Dundalk.
If you remember, Ed, you had Scotty on a phone call that was broadcast over the PA system that told the fans he wasn't going to be able to get there, but you had a substitute for Tom Brandy that night.
Right.
And you introduced King Kalua.
Right.
Do you remember that?
I remember that, but if I remember correctly, I wasn't aware of the fact that Scotty had dropped the booking, but somebody else had the information first. By the time I found about it, the tape had already been made.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Who
I don't know how, but I was not the one that took the phone call from Scotty that he wasn't going to be there that night. We were lucky to reach out and get Mike because I had worked with Mike before,
Right.
and Mike and Brandy were putting on one of the best feuds on the East
Oh,
Coast
yeah.
at the time.
There's no
you
doubt.
know, I mean, that was going on at the time. Larry Drake, Larry Winters, and DC Drake, and some others.
Mm-hmm.
But we were lucky to bring them in at that spot, and Scotty was good enough to do the thing and put him over in his place in the whole 9 yards, and it took us off the hook.
And it did. And it just, again, showed the level that you were willing to go to make sure that the fans did get every penny's worth out of your product.
Well, and to be honest, I mean, because at that point, Scotty was, well, really, he was just global at that point, right? He
Right.
really hadn't
Right.
gone to be Johnny Polo or any of that
No,
yet.
right. That was
Um,
it was right when he started, because he started right off. It was right after he came out of Portland.
Right.
That's
Right.
where he had been
Right.
with Don Owens, and then he went to Global with Joe Pedicino in that group.
And we felt bad because at that point, here's this guy that's had national exposure that's part of this big card, and the last thing we want to do is not deliver. I mean, that was, again, you know, so we were able to get Kalua, and then when Scotty was willing to put Kalua over in his place with the tape and everything, I mean, it worked. Nobody came to us after the show and said, well, he wasn't here, I want my money back.
No, because it come off as storyline.
Right.
You took a lemon and made it not only a lemonade stand, but worked a business out of it and allowed them to perpetuate their feud and reintroduce that, kind of like reinvigorating the fans with that.
Right.
It was extremely good. Another stroke of genius that you had that night was you took the main event, and instead of putting it on last, because this show, February 7th, 1992, was a Friday. It was airing on a Friday night. Julie got the news media for that Friday night broadcast, the 6:30 broadcast. And you took the main event and you shuffled it around a little bit. You put it in that number 6 spot. And then you took Misty Blue Sims, and who was defending her NWA championship, and Linda Dallas, and gave them the final spot. Do you remember that?
As you've reminded me of it, I think what it was as we were waiting to get everybody in the building, and Jeff, if I'm wrong, correct me on this.
Get ready, Jeff.
I had parents who were asking me what time's the show going to be over, and they came to see Nikolai. They came to see, and I think at some point I just made that call that we were going to move that up because we knew we were going to start late. We knew we had a lot of matches. We knew the intermission was going to run because we had all these people in the building. And I'm thinking that's why I did it at that point, because of the parents asking me about
that's
it.
correct. Because
And
again,
then
we were running in that time, that bumping up against that,
Right.
getting kind of late at night for the little ones to be there for that. And we had done the whole thing with Agent Orange on the TV. We did the TV spot at the Baltimore Original Sports Bar with the cystic fibrosis. So again, that all played in, to trying to move that card, move that match down a little bit. To do that, and it worked out very well. Actually,
It
Yeah,
didn't
we
hurt
didn't
the
lose the
card.
kids either.
Right,
Yeah.
right, you
Eventually,
didn't.
it all held together because by putting the NWA women's match on top, now we put this world title on the top of the card. So I guess it worked. It just, we used that NWA title to hold the prestige of what we're putting on in the main event.
And speaking of the main event, which actually you could have looked at all three of those, the Nikolai and Honky Tonk match that night, Mike, Kalua, and Brandy, and the ladies, Misty Blue and Linda. All three of them main event caliber matches. They absolutely were. And you added a level that we want to talk to now, our guest.
Well, now we're going to talk about what sets that Nikolai Volkov Honky Tonk Man match above all the others.
And that's it. The infusion of Agent Orange in there. If you don't mind, Agent Orange, tell us a little bit about, because what I like to see from that, excuse me, is that we took 2 name brands, Honky Tonk Man, Nikolai Volkov, and we infused local talent
Added
with
a
it.
third name brand.
Exactly.
Agent Orange. And, I got to tell you, my memories of that night, they're pretty good memories. I remember sitting backstage and honky tonk man showing me, teaching me a little bit about how to play that guitar. And then I remember standing just backstage watching honky tonk beating up Nikolai, and Nikolai, you know, typical Russian, cheating and doing everything that he could, you know, just like his buddy Putin, doing everything that he could to break the rules. And I remember, you know, Nikolai taught me this great song, and I just wanted, it filled my heart with such joy that I wanted to go out there and share it with Nikolai. And so it was God Bless America, and I shared it with that big ugly Russian. And, you know, the rest of, they say, is my history, because that led on. You know, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about that match before I go ahead and talk more about me and Nikolai.
No, go ahead. You got your spot. Go for it.
All right. Well, I'm surprised. I thought you would have told me how great I was, but that's okay. Anyway, so because of that historic moment, that moment, you know, with the clashing of these two great countries, you know, America. I'm helping you out here. It's America and Russia. So,
Okay.
Anyway, so because of that, Nikolai was a little upset with me. He maybe just didn't like the tune I played on his head. But, so, you know, they decided they were going to go ahead and create this capture the flag match. I don't know whose brilliant idea it was, but we decided we're going to go ahead, Agent Orange, Nikolai Volkov, Russian flag, American flag, and we had a flag match. And, you know, it went on for quite a while. I beat the snot out of that man, you know. And, you know, things were just really good in my life. Somehow I'm a little fuzzy on the ending. I don't remember exactly what happened. I think he caught me again with some sort of foreign object or something. And somehow he comes away with his flag. And, well, you know, it just was one chapter in the history of Agent Orange and Nikolai Volkov and the feud in Maryland that, of course, nobody will ever forget.
I understand that that's your recollections of it, but I think our esteemed panel might have a little bit more different mindset to it, Agent Orange. If you can think about what happened that night and what you were trying to set up, because it is a colorful expose of what happened, but fill in a little bit of
Very
the blanks.
colorful. It was all orange in my recollection.
Fill in the blanks of what you were actually doing with that and what you were looking to move forward with.
Well, let's cut it right to the chase. We were lucky. We had Nikolai right here in Baltimore with us. We had a WWE guy that was willing to work with us. Was a great guy. Really felt privileged that he would work with us, and we wanted to take advantage of that because he was. That was another thing too, because when we brought in names, we wanted people that could work with our guys and make our guys look good and put them on a level that they could be seen as competitive to them. So we didn't have. I don't want to knock any particular aspects of the business because they're doing their business the way they see fit to do it. But again, my idea was when you bring in a name, you don't bring them in necessarily put them just against another name. You do something that brings the local guys up with it at the same time, something I learned over time. So that was the perfect thing because here's Agent Orange right here, Nikolai's
Ready
right
for an
here.
opportunity.
We got an opportunity. He's got this controversial name on top of it,
Right.
because at that time, if you weren't around, the whole Agent Orange thing was a huge issue.
Right.
It was a leftover from Vietnam.
Let me stop you a little bit right there because Agent Orange originated out of my love and respect for the soldiers that gave their lives, that gave everything for this country. I was behind the soldiers and I was supporting the VWA long before it was cool.
It was more the idea of the Agent Orange was it was natural to a heel at that time because there was a lot of controversy about what it did to our soldiers, what it did to other people. So it was a natural heel thing. I thought it was a brilliant gimmick.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, really for its time, because then later people were doing other stuff, you know, but at that time, it was
Right.
just, you know, it was just, yeah, it fit. And then with Nikolai,
Greatness is copied.
you know, he was already was a
Napalm.
face. He had already become a face on WWE TV, so it was a natural. It wasn't like we had to bring him in and turn him to make this angle work. And that was part of the idea. That was part of how we were going to do our carryovers to our next card.
And that kind of opened the door for you too, Julie, with what you had to do with selling your advertisement, because now you have a local brand, a grassroots, homegrown local brand, and you've infused it with internationally known talent. So, with a little bit of that, what was your perspective going into the whole thing with, now you knew what was going to be going on with Agent Orange moving forward. You were doing exactly what Ed just said. You just now melded the indies with the big names.
And that was part of the business plan.
Right.
Or the business model. And again, you know, it made my job easier. I think one of my missteps was not having tickets printed for the next card to sell at the show that night.
Right. Well,
Right.
But live and learn.
I guess, you know, the thing was we really looked at, you know, we had the convention, we had this long-term plan, we knew where we were going. Unfortunately, again, when wrestling meets business people, and there's got to be that melding between the wrestling business and the business of business, and that night became an expectation for every show.
an unreal expectation.
An unreal expectation, and was known that it was not going to be like this every show. We pulled everything together and created something great, and from there to continue to build to have another show like this.
Right. And I tell you, that's one of the things that we're going to tackle on our next segment, and that they're perfect segues. Where we went from that point, because that night, historic night, still hasn't been matched on the indie scene. When you talk about putting 2,000 butts in seats, hasn't been touched. People have gotten close, but you had a mission and a place to go. And that's what we're going to do, Tim. I'm going to throw it back to you in the studio, and we're going to get prepared for our next portion of this, of the correspondence report of where Win went from that historic show.
So stay tuned for the next episode as we continue to talk about the impact of the Wrestling Independent Network and its inaugural card on February 7th, 1992. This is the 25th anniversary of that big card. So stay tuned, and our next episode, we'll talk a little bit more about the impact of that card.
It was unheard of in Baltimore. I mean, you had some people that were drawing crowds because they were doing high school shows, and the high school showed up, and you had some people that were giving away tickets, but for us to do those kind of numbers with people buying the tickets, and yeah, I mean, the people just kept coming in, and you come out, and Jeff would run back and said, "There's more people coming in," and we had to start worrying about if we could get the show started on time, because we had to get all the people in.
I remember that.
Yeah, we had to run back.
Because we didn't want anybody to miss anything, but yet we didn't want to disrespect the fans that were already there that got this good seats because they got there early. But
A lot of hustle behind the scenes, with extra chairs. I mean,
And we were worried about a time frame too, because obviously we couldn't be there all
All
night,
night.
right? To
Yeah.
do that, because we had to break down and all that, and Martin's had some type of event the next day, so obviously, you know, we just couldn't be there the whole time, and then we didn't want to get, obviously, like Ed said, for the respect of the fans that were there were a lot of kids there too, so we didn't want to be doing, you know, 11:30 midnight trying to finish a card up. That would have been, you know, counterproductive.
yeah, and that was another thing because we kept that crowd till the end of the show. Which again, for those type of shows, the indie shows, many times people showed up, they come see, there'd be like a local guy in the card, and they come see their guy wrestle, and then they go home, and as the evening went through, things would thin out unless you had a big name on top. But the show was entertaining. There was a couple gimmick matches in there. There was the main event, and the show just flowed. I mean, you didn't want to walk away. I mean,
you kept them to the very end.
It was just, again, for what we were doing in this market at this time, we did something that nobody ever did before, and people said you couldn't do. And 25 years later, here we sit talking about it, and I'm amazed. I really am.
Well, and that's typical, and I got to give Ed all the credit in the world for that. The way he set that card up, and we've talked about it before on the show. You basically got two shows. You got your from the opening match up to intermission. That was one thing because it built up, and then from intermission to the main event. So you got two shows for the price of one.